Hi. My name is Candy Crowley. Welcome to the National Summit on Resilience, the Brain, and Meditation. As your invitation noted, today we want to look at the research and the applications of TM to promote resilience, help overcome post-traumatic stress disorder, and other stresses among veterans, active duty personnel, cadets, and their families. The need to help form a generation of resilient warriors is pretty clear. We're talking about warriors equipped not just with the tools of combat, but with the tools to adapt to the mental and emotional stresses of today's military life. Like you, I'm reminded way too often in the news business of the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD among our veterans, the suicides, the attempted suicides, and the toll it takes on loved ones and caregivers. I am so pleased to be at this forum where we have a stellar cast of military leaders and medical researchers, really of the highest caliber, who are here despite some really crazy busy schedules to explore the practical effective solutions to help overcome PTSD and the related stresses. I learned TM several years ago. It's helped me manage the stress in my life, which is minuscule compared to what the military personnel face every day. But I'm still aware of this compelling research on TM and PTSD. I've heard amazing stories of the transformation among meditating vets. And I know the nonprofit organization that's hosting this event, the David Lynch Foundation, and its division operation, Warrior Wellness. They are all great. Like you, I always want to know more. I want to see where the research has gone and what the smart folks are learning. So I want to begin with our first speaker, W. Scott Gould. He is the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA. Prior to that, he held top executive positions at IBM Global Business Services, the O'Gara Company, an investment services firm, and Evolve, which is the tech services company. He is, I think more importantly to this, a Navy veteran. He served aboard the guided missile destroyer Richard E. Byrd as a naval intelligence reservist. Captain Gould was recalled to active duty for Operation Noble Eagle and Enduring Freedom. He is co-author of a book, The People Factor, Strengthening America by Investing in the Public Service. Ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Secretary of the VA, W. Scott Gould.
Well, I don't know how many folks here have tuned in on Sunday mornings to that voice. It's nice to actually meet you, Candy. And that's a great program. Thank you all for inviting me to your National Summit on Resilience, the Brain, and Meditation. I'm pleased to be here with several colleagues, Dr. Raul Pereja-Hense, Ms. Jan Kemp, Dr. Alex Amaya, and Dr. Sonia Batten. Thank you for all the work that you do at the VA. This summit is particularly timely. Alternative forms of medicine for patients with post-traumatic stress are gaining acceptance, they're increasing in popularity, they're augmenting our current healthcare solutions. It wasn't long ago, in the lifetimes of many of us in this room, when combat or other trauma-related stresses defied diagnosis, much less proper and timely treatment. Pablum advice like, shake it off, you'll be fine, only tended to trivialize the deeply rooted pain that stigmatized and ate away at the lives of too many veterans. We may never know the number of soldiers and veterans stricken by stress that the system failed to recognize or acknowledge. After more than a decade of war, there's a renewed and growing awareness that the consequence of combat, the urgent need we have to attend to the invisible wounds of war, and our obligation to care for those whom we have sent as a country into harm's way. I think it's fair to say that we're adopting a more informed vision of the many mental stressors that affect our warriors and veterans on and off the battlefield. Today we know that many veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress. We know their symptoms and their pain are real. We also know that there are proven treatments that can provide hope, relief, and healing. And we are also humbled by what we don't know about how to prevent and treat PTSD. But as evidenced by your attendance here today and by the work that you're doing, you're bringing awareness to the problem and new approaches to deal with it. Now at VA, we're also working to raise awareness about post-traumatic stress disorder. We're providing world-class mental health treatment, and we're seeking out new and better ways to prevent and treat PTSD. The scale of our effort is substantial. 20,500 mental health providers, treating at least 1.3 million veterans with specialty care in mental health at a cost of about $5.9 billion annually. VA uses state-of-the-art clinical practice guidelines for PTSD care. They were developed collaboratively with the Department of Defense. We employ an integrated mental health strategy that includes help for families and helps provide continuity of care for service members who are transitioning into veteran status. We screen 100% of the service members and encourage treatment through our Make the Connection campaign that helps veterans of all eras learn more about how other veterans have benefited from treatment and care, and of course to seek that for themselves. And we also cooperate with a wide range of nonprofit organizations, 501c3s, whose dedicated volunteers provide additional options and complementary services. It's really a team effort. But all of you know that we are also overcoming a terrific headwind. First is our own culture. I'm okay. I can handle this. Incentives in the work environment that basically say, if I admit I need help, maybe I'm going to jeopardize that next promotion or call into question my security clearance. As families, we shield people from the recognition that they need help. He's okay. They'll get over it. Don't pay any attention to that behavior. And finally, and most profoundly, our own inability to admit when we need help and take the difficult step of reaching out for it. But the fact remains that even when we do get people into treatment, not everyone responds to treatments currently offering the most likelihood of benefit. And so we have to learn to recognize, relieve, and cure PTSD to veterans' patients in new ways. To this end, VA has called on a proud tradition of mental health research and development that has produced effective treatments for PTSD, such as cognitive processing and prolonged exposure therapy, as well as leading-edge clinical care that has been extended to include many alternative and complementary medicine treatments, including meditation. Last year, VA completed 2 evidence reviews that screened 1,776 articles and selected 7 randomized clinical trials for review. The conclusion was that current evidence on meditation and PTSD needs enhancement. We know that meditation has been used in treatment of PTSD, and we're anxious to identify its benefits and to determine if there are any potential risks for veterans in its use and under this condition. To develop our understanding of the effectiveness of meditation, we group meditation into roughly 3 buckets: transcendental meditation, mantric repetition, and mindfulness. And we resolved to fund studies in each of those areas. As a result, VA has supported 3 clinical trials and 9 evaluation projects to study the effectiveness on meditation on PTSD. These projects have begun, and we're looking forward to the results across all 3 types of meditation. One recently published VA-supported clinical trial on mantra meditation showed that it was helpful in reducing PTSD symptoms, such as hyperarousal, compared to a control group. Our meditation field projects have been well received by our veterans, and this is critical. We have to recruit people on a voluntary basis to participate, and we expect to recruit even more in the coming months. We've also begun work collaboratively with the National Institute of Health and the DoD on future research opportunities in this area. With your help, the help of the people in this room, we are understanding the effectiveness of meditation and PTSD in new ways, and we're hoping to join a range of potential therapeutic approaches to treat PTSD at the VA. What we once imagined as a new care paradigm may find its proven and rightful place in practical applications to the benefit of our veterans, adding to the tools we have to provide even better care that is safe, effective, and evidence-based. The point here is that these techniques are additive to the set of treatments that we have for our veterans today. VA continues to encourage our researchers to explore new areas of treatment for PTSD, including meditation. And we intend to make available additional research and development funding in the future to make this possible. Thanks for your invitation today to bring attention to the potential that meditation has on PTSD and to highlight VA's commitment to expanding our understanding of how to prevent and relieve PTSD with evidence-based studies. Today's summit, this summit, will shed more light on studies that have been performed, areas of promise, and opportunities for future study. Congratulations to the David Lynch Foundation and for all you are doing to address the mental health needs of our veterans. Thank you.
It's just exciting to me to have someone with the Secretary's stature to be looking at this and to be encouraging this. It's just such a huge step, I think, as Bobby would agree with me. I'd like to now introduce you to Dr. John Hagelin. He is a Harvard-trained quantum physicist, but president of the David Lynch Foundation, which I understand better than the quantum physicist part. Dr. Hagelin conducted pioneering research at CERN in Switzerland and the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center. His scientific contributions include development of a highly successful grand unified field theory based on the superstring. There'll be a test right after this. In addition, Dr. Hagelin is one of the world's foremost experts on the effects of meditation on brain development and the use of meditation to promote physical and mental health and to reduce stress and stress-related disease. Dr. Hagelin, you're on.
As Candy said, this afternoon we're going to be taking a quick look at the research and applications of one very effective approach for the treatment of PTSD and other stress-related problems that our veterans confront due to the severity of circumstances on the battlefield. The TM technique is a very simple, easy to learn, easy to practice, non-religious technique that is practiced today by about 6 million people. And the research that has been done on this technique now over years suggests that it is a simple way to take deep rest at will. Rest, according to research, that is deeper than sleep and more effective at relieving anxiety and easing stress-related illness of all kinds than other approaches typically in the area of relaxation or even meditation. We all know we need to do something innovative, something new to address a very serious problem. Hundreds of thousands of our returning troops suffer from PTSD. And in 2009, for example, more people died of suicide among our veterans than from battle. So it's a serious problem. The existing conventional treatments are questionably effective. So we certainly need to look carefully at anything new that shows this kind of promise. It is really wonderful today to be in the midst of such distinguished military leaders and such distinguished scientists and medical researchers. I'm going to take a moment now to introduce a very distinguished veteran, and that is Jerry Yellen, who is the co-chair of Operation Warrior Wellness. He is an 88-year-old decorated P-51 pilot from World War II. He landed on Iwo Jima on March 7th of 1945. He strafed Japanese positions for the Marines and flew 19 VLR missions over Japan. He and his wife of 62 years, Helene, have 4 sons and 6 grandchildren, 3 of whom live in America and 3 of whom live in Japan. Jerry Allen.
On April 7th, 1945, I took off from Iwo Jima. On the wing of a V-29, we navigated to Japan. And I looked out the window as I focused my gun cameras of my P-51 on the tip of Iwo Jima. I was 3 weeks into, or 7 weeks into my 21st year, and I said, "What's a guy from Hillside, New Jersey doing here over Japan?" And now, at 88, I stand in front of a grand assembly of educators and scientists, and I'm saying, what's this 88-year-old guy doing here? My story is simple. I flew 19 long-range missions. I was a pilot of a P-51. I had a pure purpose in my life to kill my enemy. I flew with 16 guys that didn't come back. And when the war ended in August 14th, 1945, I came back to America, and I was a lost soul. I had no purity of purpose for my life. I had no life. I was married in 1949, a father of 4 children, and I had addictive behavior for 30 years until 1975, when I learned Transcendental Meditation. My enemy was an identifiable enemy. Combat is stressful but exhilarating for me. Can you imagine, 20 years old, flying P-51s? And then the letdown was so gigantic that I didn't have a soul. When I learned Transcendental Meditation in 1975, I got my life back. We have been fighting for 18 years, 10 years in one place and 8 years in another. The enemy is not an identified enemy. They speak another language, they wear different clothes. Friends and enemies look alike. And the stress that our soldiers, our Marines, our sailors, the military are under is immeasurable. And then they come home, and they don't know who they are. Transcendental Meditation saved my life. It can save their lives. You're going to hear some science. You're going to hear from people who practice meditation. Please listen carefully. Take it to heart. We all have an obligation to take care of our veterans. Those who perform acts of kindness without expectation of reward receive the greatest reward of all, immortality. Let's all become immortal. Thank you very much.
As Jerry and Secretary Gould alluded to, PTSD was once a secret that so many military men and women just lived with over the generations and struggled with. One of those, Dan Burks, was just 19 years old when he went off to Vietnam.
I had got a scholarship to go to college. And, everybody's there to avoid the draft. And at the end of the first year, I thought, no, this is wrong. I'm going to go to war. I left and I volunteered for the infantry. We were attacked at night. I'm at this place called Budap. The machine gunner hid. So I ended up being machine gunner. The first night, I killed 14 people. That fight went on for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So this is very, very, very distressing. And it creates huge amounts of distress in your system. In your system. Getting home is difficult. And that's a whole big deal because things changed. Things changed. All of a sudden, you're in a different culture. All these people don't understand you. They have no idea. They don't realize that you're always still in the rubber plantation of the jungle. I stopped talking to my parents. I had really bad relationships with other people. I did not feel happiness. I did not feel sorrow. I did not feel surprise. My feelings were gone. The first time that I learned about Transcendental Meditation was in Vietnam. December 18th, 1967, Newsweek. This is that 2-week battle at Budap that I was telling you about. And this is my unit. We went out and got ambushed. And this is me, doing my job. And then later in the magazine, coincidentally, is this. That's where I first learned about TM. This is an article about Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and a couple of guys in my platoon. One of them got the magazine, and he came running over. He said, "Perks, you got to read this." So I did, and I said, "I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that." So one day, my wife comes home, says, "Hey, I saw a poster about Transcendental Meditation." And I remembered that article in that magazine about Maharishi, and that I said I was going to do this. So I go in, and he says, "Okay, sit down, do this." And I could not believe what happened. It was the difference between heaven and hell. It was absolutely transformational. And from that moment on, things changed. Things changed. No more drugs, no more alcohol. Life changed. As time went on, I stopped looking for ambushes. I was able to go back out in the woods, which I really enjoyed. My wife and I got along better. All of a sudden, my parents were back. I started making friends again. Everything was just better. My emotions came back. My life came back. My feeling is that the experience that I've had from TM basically saved my life. It certainly saved my way of life. And it didn't just save my way of life. It made me better.
I find that story so heartrending on the one hand and so inspiring on the other, and similar stories from so many servicemen and women with whom we've had a chance to come in contact and to work with. So how could this happen? What is Transcendental Meditation from a neurophysiological and physiological standpoint? If we could have the first slide. This defines meditation, classically understood, is a technique to take our normally outwardly directed attention powerfully within to experience deeper, quieter levels of mind, quieter, deeper levels of the thinking process, even slipping beyond thought to what is called transcendental consciousness, which is the simplest, least excited state of consciousness. When that happens, next slide, the body simultaneously gains a deep state of rest due to the relationship, the connection between mind and body. So this is one of many studies, a meta-analysis of 32 published studies showing levels of rest during the meditative state deeper than sleep and deeper by far than conventional relaxation. Next slide. The very deep rest gained during meditation is very effective at dissolving stress and anxiety. This is a major study, Stanford University meta-analysis of 146 previously published studies on the effects of various relaxation and meditation techniques on anxiety. And you can see that all the forms of relaxation tested have a statistically significant effect. But the effect of transcending, which is going to a much deeper state of rest, is certainly significantly greater. Next slide. Now, by the way, not surprisingly, relief from stress that is measurable is going to have benefits in terms of stress-related illness. And most illness is caused or complicated by stress. And we'll be hearing more about that very shortly. But I'm going to take my remaining minutes and talk about the effects of TM on the brain. Next slide. As the mind settles to deeper and deeper levels of silence, the body simultaneously, as I said, gets deep rest. Next slide. And what's happening in the brain transforms simultaneously. So every level of mental excitement or de-excitement, levels of mental rest, have their own electrophysiological profile. There's a difference between active attention or concentration and cognitive processing, which looks very different from the quiet reflection you might find in a typical meditative practice, like a mindfulness practice, very, very distinct. Transcending is going beyond even that quietest level of reflection to a state of complete silence where the electrophysiology is again completely different. Next slide. To summarize it in a nutshell, you have what is called global EEG coherence, high amplitude alpha waves across the entire brain. Next slide. Analyzed mathematically, you can see on the right somebody who has been meditating twice a day for 3 months versus the same person 3 months earlier. This is during meditation. What you see on the right is a striking correlation or integration of the functioning of the brain, so-called global EEG coherence or maximum orderliness of brain functioning. Next slide. Well, orderliness of brain functioning to such a striking degree has more than academic interest, because orderly brain functioning correlates with intelligence and rising IQ, creativity, learning ability, memory, academic performance, moral reasoning, psychological stability, emotional maturity, alertness, reaction time, resilience. Everything good about the brain depends on its orderly functioning. Now there seems to be something extremely simple that anyone can do and learn in a couple of days to systematically increase the orderliness of the functioning of the brain. Next slide. When it comes to stress and traumatic stress, those who are doing research in this field have identified that as a result of acute stress, overwhelming stress, traumatic stress, the fear center or amygdala of the brain lights up as it is supposed to do, but doesn't always settle back down. The amygdala is like a math coprocessor or fast floating point processor that filters all of our sensory input, does a fast scan of everything we see before it even registers in the rest of the brain. And it is scanning continuously for possible threats, like a tiger jumping out from behind a rock. That sends the heart into palpitations. It does a variety of things that it is supposed to do. It triggers the fight or flight response. Next slide. And part of the fight or flight response is to shut down the so-called higher brain or prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher human functions like planning, judgment, decision-making, and shunts the blood flow to the rest of the brain, the reactive brain or primitive brain, appropriate for flight or fight or flight. But unfortunately, when the stress is acute, it is sometimes the case that the amygdala gets stuck on overdrive, a chronic excitation of the amygdala. And when that happens, the fear center is on constant alert, hypervigilance it's called, and you see threats everywhere where threats are not. Settling down to sleep, for example, becomes very difficult. And we're going to be hearing more also in a moment about what this actually means for the lives of soldiers and veterans on the actual experience, day-to-day experience. And for that, next slide, using brain imaging technology like fMRI, you can actually see the amygdala cool down and its surrounding subcortical structure, surrounding basal ganglia, and you can see a reactivation and restoration of blood flow and metabolic balance to the brain, something that didn't happen or doesn't necessarily happen for somebody even after months and months of regular sleep and rest. But the deeper rest of transcendental meditation can unfreeze, unstick the accelerator, and even very quickly, over a period of days or months, as we will see, can restore balance to the functioning of the brain. Next slide, please. So it is a great pleasure for me to talk about what this really means for life and living, to introduce Dr. Norman Rosenthal, clearly highly esteemed, really one of the foremost psychiatrists in the country, to talk about this. For 20 years, Dr. Norman Rosenthal served as senior researcher at the National Institute of Mental Health and currently serves as clinical professor of psychiatry at Georgetown University Medical School. Dr. Rosenthal is the internationally renowned psychiatrist who first described what's called seasonal affective disorder, SAD, and pioneered the use of light therapy for its treatment. He is the author of over 200 scholarly articles and 5 books for the general public, including his most recent book, Transcendence, Healing and Transformation Through Transcendental Meditation, Dr. Norman Rosenthal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hagelin. I have heard the stories of Jerry Yellen and Dan Burks many times, but I'm never failed to be moved by them. They are so dramatic. And as a psychiatrist, I am painfully aware of the profound impact of trauma and how long the impact lasts, especially if you don't do anything. And I'm so glad to see that the consequences of trauma are being taken so seriously at this time. When we see the impressive effects of TM on these very major symptoms that Jerry Yellen and Dan Burks report, it is natural to wonder, how can such a simple technique as this have such a powerful effect on those who have suffered so much? And what I'd like to do here is to discuss some of the science that makes these apparently miraculous transformations logical and understandable. The answer to me lies in a simple word, a single word: stress. People who are terribly stressed, like soldiers under mortar fire, feel the impact powerfully on those parts of the brain that register danger, such as the amygdala, which we've already heard about. When the stress is very powerful or prolonged, these brain centers continue to reverberate long after that impact is over. It's almost like a gong that continues to vibrate long after it has been struck. The flight and fight responses remain on high alert even after the danger is over, resulting in hypervigilance, flashbacks, and nightmares. Researchers have shown that if you startle people with very loud noises or very violent images, people who are practicing TMers, who practice transcendental meditation, will settle down in their nervous systems much quicker than their non-meditating controls. TM appears to be acting as a surge protector, buffering the impact of stress on the body and mind. To show how TM can settle down flight or fight responses over time, let us look at its beneficial effects on the heart and blood vessels. What you see here is a meta-analysis of many people who have been tested TMers compared to controls in terms of reduction in blood pressure. And when you crunch all the data together, what you see is a reduction both in systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Now, this is interesting because if you think about blood pressure, it really reflects the cumulative effects of stress. When you go into the doctor to have your blood pressure measured and it's high, it doesn't mean you've been stressed just the 10 minutes before, although getting to the doctor could be stressful enough. It means there is a cumulative effect of stress. And likewise, when you're doing TM, these blood pressure measurements weren't taken just 10 minutes after a TM session. They reflect the cumulative benefit of TM over time, the carryover effect. Now, these results are not only statistically significant, they're clinically significant. And played out over time, such a reduction in blood pressure and the other benefits that reduced stress confer will lead to significantly fewer heart attacks, strokes, and will actually prolong life. Now, that seems like a pretty wild claim, doesn't it? Let's take a look at the next slide to see what it shows. This is a decreased mortality rate in persons over age 55. These were people who were studied years before in these controlled blood pressure studies, and nobody really had followed them over the ensuing 9 years on average, but they checked death records. So they don't even know if these people continued to do TM. But when they checked the death records, compared to those people who 9 years before on average had been assigned to the control condition, those who had meditated had an overall decreased mortality of 23% and 30% when you looked at cardiovascular mortality. So this is a very impressive result, which Dr. Hagelin actually showed a replication, a prospective study showing a similar decrease in mortality when people are watched over time. And what was really so impressive about the data that Dr. Hagelin showed, and I should say Dr. Robert Schneider is the lead investigator on these wonderful studies. What was so impressive about the data Dr. Hagelin showed is that those people whose lives were extended, whose mortality was decreased, were on all the standard treatments, lowering blood pressure medications, cholesterol medications, diet, exercise, all the normal things. But despite that, the addition of TM was so potent that it had a major effect on mortality. Now, it has been said that what is good for the heart is also good for the brain, and that makes sense because the same blood vessels that feed our heart with blood and with oxygen, those are the same kinds of blood vessels that feed the brain, and what's good for the one is going to be good for the other. Now, we know how harmful stress can be to the brain. For example, an estimated 40 million people suffer from major anxiety disorders. And as for the rest of us, well, with the economy and global warming and keeping your job and holding your job, we're all pretty much stressed out as well. So the good news, of course, is that TM can cushion the impact of many different types of stress. In fact, across the board, it is one of the biggest stress relievers that I've ever encountered in over 30 years as a practicing psychiatrist. I have often thought that if it were a drug that could be put in a capsule and marketed and patented, it would be $1 billion blockbuster. In conclusion, it's high time for this promising technique to be more widely researched and used. Remember, it is cheap, requires no special equipment, can be used anywhere, anytime. In short, it is the gift that keeps on giving. In my opinion, it is the time that we made this gift more widely available. Thank you.
So we have heard a little bit about how TM can help veterans overcome the nightmare of PTSD, but the next natural question is how do you prevent it from happening in the first place, which is why today, for the first time, you're going to hear the story of a visionary military college president, his staff, and his cadets who are using TM in a new way to promote resilience, to upgrade the way cadets are trained before they are sent out in harm's way. This year, Norwich began training a select group of cadets in Transcendental Meditation to see how meditation can benefit a soldier long before he or she sees combat.
For Norwich, we've always worried about the whole person because in battle and in leadership positions of the United States military, you have to be a whole person. And so we've always concentrated not only making you very smart and making you very strong, making you a great leader, an ethical leader. I think that TM will provide us another whole dimension of integrating all of that, improving my performance in all of those domains. And I haven't found anything else that can do that yet.
Last semester I had a pretty heavy course load, as well as being cadre for a platoon, so having 27 recruits that are under my command and trying to lead them as well as balancing my academics. And I was tired all the time. My muscles were tired, my mind was tired, I was beginning to fall asleep in class. And I started meditating and I started noticing the difference right away. I became more alert, and when I meditated my body became more relaxed. I actually feel my muscles being relaxed. My mind was rejuvenated after every time. And that semester I got the highest GPA I've ever got with 23 credits, the biggest course load I've ever taken, with 2 seminar classes. I got a 3.47 GPA.
One of the biggest differences I've noticed between my platoon and some of the other platoons is we're more professional and we're more locked on. We're not joking around, they're not breaking their bearing, they're keeping that 1,000-mile stare. Them meditating does make my job a lot easier. I'm not an angry person by nature, don't tell the rooks that, but I don't like yelling at people if I don't have to, but if I can talk to them and get them to do something with just a stern tone, then that's much better for me, and I think it's more effective for them as well. Meditation definitely enhances their ability to essentially comprehend what we're telling them to do. I remember when I was a rook, we were told things 3 or 4 times before we finally got it right. We tell it to them once, maybe twice, and they're getting it right.
We've kind of picked up a bit of a reputation on campus as those weird people that meditate, and I kindly point out to them the fact that we don't fall asleep in class. We've got better PT scores, we do better on tests, we have better uniforms, we don't get yelled at as much as they do, and then they quiet down pretty quickly after that. I would say the biggest benefit is the energy. I mean, in high school I would drink like a whole thermos full of coffee a day, and I don't have to do that anymore. It feels good to not have to rely on things like that and be able to do it myself.
I was a skeptic at first, but now that I've learned, it's great. I mean, I've directly seen the benefits. I'm a senior, and I've never gotten over a 3.0. This semester, I've had 22 credits, 4 lab sciences, and I have a 3.6. I don't think I just got that much smarter. I think the TM helps me focus, and so when I study, I get more benefits out of it.
I'm happy that, Norwich is now following them and looking at their grades and their retention and all the objective outcome measures that an organization would care about. So just like the Army would look at, we're happy if you feel better, but we're really happy if you feel better and you don't get in trouble and you perform better and you are retained longer.
As a leader, you have to be alert, plain and simple. You need to know what's going on with your men. I believe that being introduced to the TM program as a future leader, you will become more alert and you will be able to pick things up more easily. You'll be able to handle with the stress of leadership.
The one thing I notice about the platoon that's practicing meditation is how the cadet leaders and the rooks are handling stress. This appears to be an effective tool for our cadets to help them handle the stressful military school environment where they are really striving for excellence academically, militarily, and in a lot of cases, physically.
The things that really stick out with the platoon that are meditating is they really make it. They are all on board with making this a priority because I believe they see their own results.
If it's well documented and it's a good thing, then why not improve our soldiers' welfare?
I've noticed I've become more patient, especially in my position in the Corps.
It's been an incredible experience. I didn't think I would be doing this in college.
I know that if I wasn't doing TM, I would be falling asleep in every single class.
There's a significant difference in not only my stress level, but my general mood.
I love it. It's amazing. It feels great. I definitely want that to carry with me into the military.
ROTC commissions 70% of all the officers of the United States. Could you imagine if, by this experiment at Norwich University, the birthplace of ROTC, if we provide a very important tool in these young officers' toolbox that they've never had the benefit of before, we can influence 70% of the officer corps in a very short period of time. And we owe it to them to give them the best tools to win. And I think this is one of these tools.
Dr. Richard Schneider is the 23rd president of Norwich University. He is a 1968 graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. He was regimental commander of the Corps of Cadets, sailing master on the bark Eagle. He was commissioned as an ensign in the Coast Guard and served 8 years of active duty, including a tour in Vietnam. He served 30 years of both active and reserve duty, retiring in 1998 as a Rear Admiral. Dr. Schneider's military awards include the Coast Guard Distinguished Service Medal, Coast Guard Meritorious Service Medal, Coast Guard Commendation Medal with Gold Star, Navy Commendation Medal, and numerous campaign decorations for service in Vietnam. He earned a master's degree in liberal studies from Wesleyan and a doctorate in public policy from the University of Delaware. Dr. Schneider is, amidst all of this, married to Jamie Gilroy and has 4 married daughters. Dr. Schneider, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and it's an honor to meet Candy. I feel like I know her. You've been in my living room for a long time, so I'm going to call you Candy if that's okay. It's great. Great to see you. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm going to tell you a short story of this walk with TM. In the fall of '09, I got an incredible call from a wonderful friend of Norwich, whose father actually was a trustee for years, one of our most distinguished trustees, Joan Andrews, and it was her dad. And in fact, there was a beautiful gym named after him. And she said, I need you to look at something. I said, okay, what? She said, I'm going to send you some stuff about the David Lynch Foundation, and particularly about what they're doing in post-traumatic stress disorder and how they're helping our veterans, and what they're doing in high schools for high-risk students. And I said, TM. And I remembered the Beatles. I'm a 68 guy. And I said, oh, Joan, really? I said, let me study this a little bit. So I did. And, we did, and we invited the wonderful people from the David Lynch Foundation up. Dr. Reese came up, and Joan came with them, and Bobby came with them, Bobby Roth, who was my teacher. And I was really impressed with the science of it. I'm a data's guy. I want to see the data. And I said, this is worth trying. It's worth the risk. The political risk of being a college president and doing something that many of the faculty may have said was whacked, or with the connotations of that. And so what I did is, you always lead from the front, Candy. You don't make your troops do something that you won't do. So I said, okay, I'm willing to get trained, and who wants to join me? So we had 15 people volunteer, faculty members and staff, and we had our first time of training with the wonderful teachers from the David Lynch Foundation. And we were very impressed as a group. I honestly do think I'm a better president. At least I'm a less stressful president. I may not be a better one, but I'm less stressed personally. And that was great. So we then approached the senior leadership of the regiment and said, listen, we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 months, very quietly, by the way. We didn't tell anybody about it because I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. So I didn't want to get everybody excited about this. So we were kind of like just doing this very quietly. And we had about 300 students in the beautiful Plumley Armory. And we got a bunch of volunteers. And we trained 37 of them. And they gave us a thumbs up on it also. We need to do this. So that summer we wrote to the entire inbound Rook class. Rooks are recruits. That's the Norwich shorthand. For those of you that want to come to Norwich again, please, or come. You can send your young people to us. We'd love to have them. But we wrote to them, and over 60 parents said, I'd love my student to be able to experience this training. And by the way, it's all volunteers. So we set up 2 platoons, one that had been trained right away as soon as they arrived at school, and then a control group. Within a couple weeks, the control group was angry with us. We want that training now, because they were hearing stories from their classmates about how much better they were doing in school. And for me, it's all about improving performance, academically, athletically, discipline-wise, in every way at school as a whole person. So actually, that group did finally get trained this spring. And we were so impressed with the results that we're doing it again. Of course, as steady as you go, we're going to do this again for 60 students. In fact, some of the freshmen that were trained will become sophomore cadre members overseeing the new ones coming in because they understand what to expect. So we couldn't be more thankful for the wonderful support we've gotten from the David Lynch Foundation or the great financial support we got from the Education Foundation of America, which is one of Joan Andrews' foundations. And what's happening for our students, it's a very simple idea, gang. If we can get them to have this tool before they go into battle, they'll be able to handle their own personal stress better, which means their troops will appreciate that from their leaders better. And then when they can come back home, perhaps they will be more resilient as well. So we're looking forward to tracking these students through their entire career and see if that can happen. That is our goal, to make them stronger, really smart, really strong, really brave, and emotionally prepared for the traumas of war. It's my pleasure to introduce one of our researchers, Carol Bandy, just promoted on Sunday by the Board of Trustee action to professor, the highest rank one could achieve in the military or in the academic world, and she's just a great scientist. And why don't you welcome Dr. Carol Bandy.
My colleagues and I have been studying the neurophysiology of the threat response and post-traumatic stress in veterans and cadets for the last 5 years. So when the university contacted me regarding evaluating the effectiveness of the new TM training program for Rooks, I immediately recognized the opportunity for a longitudinal study, comparing the TM-trained cadets to those we had already tested. We hypothesized that TM training would not only reduce stress, but that it would also build resilience and psychological hardiness, and that this would happen over time gradually. And ultimately, psychological hardiness and resilience would help to either prevent a severe response to eventual combat trauma or to allow them to recover from it more rapidly. In the process, of course, we could evaluate the effectiveness of the TM training in the short term as well. So these were and are our research questions. Great, this works. So for the present study, we had 60 freshman volunteers, rooks, who were randomly assigned to one of two conditions. First group was immediately trained in the TM technique. This was the experimental group. Or they were assigned to be in the control group, the poor control group, which had to wait 6 months. But they were invaluable for the study. It's because of them that we now have confidence in the findings that I'm going to be presenting to you. Okay, so prior to training, baseline measures were obtained for both groups, including a battery of questionnaires covering stress, trauma, resilience, cognitive, and affective states. In addition, neurophysiological measures, including pupillometry, EEG, and behavioral tasks related to cognition and attention. All of these were administered. Okay. The TM training group meditated twice daily as a group for 20 minutes, and the control group received no stress reduction techniques of any kind. Both groups were trained in the normal way. The battery of questionnaires was re-administered to both groups after 9 weeks of TM practice, and all neurophysiological measures were re-administered after 6 months of TM practice. As a matter of fact, we've just recently finished collecting the EEG data. And importantly, all data analysis was blind to condition. Okay, today I'm going to be telling you about the preliminary findings based on 2 months of TM practice. To sum up the findings, we found that anxiety, depression, stress, and mood disturbance all decreased. And we also found that constructive thought, positive coping, and resilience all increased. And as a matter of fact, these increased very strongly. We'll get to that in a moment. First, we start with state anxiety. We found that for the control group, state anxiety remained the same, but state anxiety decreased significantly for the TM group. We used the Beck Depression Inventory, which is the gold standard for measuring depression. And again, we found that the control group stayed virtually the same from pre to post, but we found an enormous decrease for the TM trained group. Perceived stress also declined for the TM group, but not for the control group. It was pretty clear by the time we got to this point that the two groups were in fact comparable, that random assignment had done its job of eliminating and washing out individual differences between the two groups. Okay, one more negative aspect of affect that went down was mood disturbance, and this is really bad moods, essentially, is what this is measuring. And they decrease for the TM group, but not for the control group. Okay, so far we've seen various forms of negative affect have decreased significantly and across the board for the TM group, but not for the control group. It's always good to have less of negative feeling states, but what about improvement? First, we see that the scores on the dispositional resilience scale indicate a very large increase in resilience for the TM group. Now, the dispositional resilience scale is the gold standard for measuring psychological hardiness. It's thought to be the best overall measure of resilience, and resilience is a broad construct. It was expected this was going to take at least a year of TM practice, but we found a significant increase in only 2 months. Keep in mind that this came during the most intense part of the Rook training. Both groups, the TM group, the experimental group, and the control group, started with resilience at the same level as that of the national norm for American cadets and also for Scandinavian cadets. These norms are reported by Paul Bartone, who developed the short version of the dispositional resilience scale that we used. But what we see is that the TM group just blew past the norms for all American cadets and Scandinavian cadets in 2 months. And this was an extremely large statistical effect, so we have great confidence in it. This scale is known to predict success in Army Special Ops. Okay. The constructive thinking inventory was used to measure whether negative kinds of thinking, things like esoteric thinking, superstitious thinking, naive optimism, if those would decrease and more positive aspects of thought would increase. Better logic, better understanding of cause and effect, that sort of thing. And again, we found an enormous effect for the TM group in increase of constructive thinking. This was quite large. We also found on a subscale of it that problem solving and coping also increased. Okay, finally, we come to what really excites me, and that's the future analysis that's going to begin as soon as classes end. Finally, we're going to be taking a look at what's going on in the brain. My colleagues and I are quite excited about this. We are eagerly arguing with each other about what it is that's happening. And so we will be looking at the following EEG measures: error-related negativity, and also error-related positivity, which is the flip side of it. This seems to have to do with the ability of the brain to inhibit errors, but also, more importantly perhaps, to learn quickly from mistakes. We're also going to be looking at novel P300, which is a measure that correlates with hypervigilance. In the work we've done with veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, we found that they did have a heightened P300. They also had heightened hypervigilance, but the ones who were suffering the most also had a high level of dissociation on the dissociation scale. We'll also be looking at alpha power and alpha coherence, this measure of brain integration that Fred Travis has developed. It looks to be quite promising. It looks at the balancing of the brain front to back and left to right. We want to examine that. Something that my research team has pioneered is the use of eye tracking to look at threat response. And this actually gives us a very fine detail of analysis of how each individual is responding to threat. Pupil dilation to threat, attention and avoidance. How does a person deal with that? Arousal and threat recovery, is it rapid? Does it occur at all? And accuracy of visual attention. Let me show you an example of the kinds of measures that we're getting with eye tracking. This is a typical split screen image that we use to assess fixation. You see that on the image on the left, there are many eye fixations that are recorded as circles that are aqua. This is not surprising because this is a disturbing, unusual image. Compared to the right, that is to say, the one on the right is similar in terms of the position of the individual, but obviously the meaning is extremely different. So this is going to give us a great deal of information. Okay, the significance. Resilience and constructive thought developed much faster than we had expected. And it's not just resilience according to the dispositional resilience scale, but literally all of these results that we found and that have been found over and over again over the last 40 years for TM, that's resilience. Resilience is a decrease in negative emotions. It is an increase in positive traits and abilities. So we would say then that the results of the TM practice are essentially resilience. The TM effect is a resilience effect. And resilience is known to be the opposite of post-traumatic stress, which is why we're so very interested in it. Now, the last question I will leave you with, the one ultimately most exciting, I think, to neuroscientists is the brain, during the practice of transcendental meditation, optimizing itself? Possibly what occurs during transcendental meditation is that the conditions are set up very easily for the brain to take over and run its own maintenance script that allows it to literally return to normal and then move beyond that to a more optimal state. At any rate, we will continue this as a longitudinal study, and thank you very much. The next speaker today is Lieutenant Colonel Mark Hagenlacher. He is an assistant commandant at Norwich University, and I must say he's become a good friend, and without him, it would have been very difficult to collect 120 EEGs.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'd like to share with you some observations about the TM platoon at Norwich. I've been involved in this project for a year and a half, as I was one of the first group to be trained at Norwich. I was asked to conduct the project in my battalion, and I accepted the task. Our initial task was to develop a plan to implement training in one platoon in the 4th Battalion. Testing and training was to begin during Rook Orientation Week and then continue throughout the year. At our school, this was a significant cultural change. Why is this? We all saw the picture of the Beatles and laughed. Need I say any more? Well, the Corps of Cadets is currently a regiment of 1,300 students organized into 5 different battalions. 2 battalions, the 3rd and the 4th, each consisting of approximately 300 cadets, are dedicated to training the new Rook class. Rook Arrival Week consists of nonstop training each day from 05:30 in the morning until 2200. Training dedicated to transforming the new recruits into Rooks who understand the basics of military courtesy, drill, and maintaining both their uniforms and their rooms. A week later, classes start, and now we add academics to the mix. By March, their cadre are required to successfully complete the training mission and have them recognized as freshman cadets. Adding additional responsibilities to this mission are not typically popular. To prepare our Rooks to be trained in TM during this busy time, we needed to add in 4 hours of group training and testing and 1 hour of individual testing. A daunting task, the cadre requested to develop and execute the schedule for their recruits. This unique group of cadre was developed using key leaders who had participated in the spring TM trial. The leaders assisted in developing and shaping a chain of command in the 4th Battalion and specifically in the Cadet Training Command 11 TAC 4 that was willing to participate and support the additional responsibilities. All TM testing and training was accomplished on time, and cadre also ensured each missed Rook training session was made up for each and every recruit. After training, we needed to create, for the TM platoon, dedicated time to meditate during the week. During our trial, we determined that routine practice would be defined as enabling them to meditate at least 10 times for 20 minutes per session during a typical week. We set up a schedule that allowed them 11 opportunities. To enable this, we moved most of our recruits out of their 0800 classes and then established a second time each evening during sergeant's training time. This was not a popular move. Although losing 20 minutes of training time Monday through Friday nights, our rooks still had the highest average on their rook knowledge tests in their company. My motivation initially for conducting the TM test was based on our experiences and data that TM appeared to be a practice that would have benefit for our students to better handle the stresses of being scholars and cadets. As we were preparing to start the project this summer, the loss of one of my classmates from the Naval Academy, Captain Select Kurt Yingling, class of '88, to a battle with PTSD, galvanized me to action and has kept me focused on investigating the potential impact TM will have on our cadets as they prepare to serve our nation. Thank you very much. I forgot I was supposed to introduce the cadets. I'd now like to have 4 cadets who are from the 1143 platoon tell us their stories. Gentlemen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Jennings from Gales Ferry, Connecticut, and I am a senior at Norwich University. Next week, I will be graduating from the Military College of Vermont, but also commissioning as an aviation second lieutenant in the United States Army. Hua. I began Transcendental Meditation in the 2011 spring study. As pointed out in the video, I undertook a difficult challenge of taking 23 credits, endeavored in a rigorous PT program that required being up at 4:30 every morning, and undertook the responsibility of training and developing 27 recruits into 27 motivated cadets and personnel. I believe that due to Transcendental Meditation that I was able to multitask between PT, training, and my academics. I was able to adapt to the current situation and develop a strong sense of resiliency while still maintaining high motivation. This year, I undertook the responsibility of being a company commander for 11-4, consisting of 2 normal Rook platoons and the Transcendental Meditation Rook platoon. It seems at first that all the platoons I was in charge of were the same. However, as the year progressed, I began noticing changes within the Transcendental Meditation platoon. They were not having difficulty staying awake during study hours or throughout the day in class. Their uniforms were pristine, their discipline and morale high, much higher than the average platoon. This was no mere coincidence. The same thing that was happening that happened to me the year prior. Discipline, confidence, situational awareness, performance, motivation, adaptability, and resiliency were improved drastically compared to any other platoon I have witnessed. Ladies and gentlemen, TM works plain and simple, and has worked not only for myself, Mr. Lieber, Mr. Gerard, and Mr. Foley here, but for the entire platoon, for the platoon that is beginning the TM today. For our veterans returning home who are practicing, and for those in the future who will begin to. There's no doubt in my mind that I will carry TM with me as I start my journey through life as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. I'm Keem Foley, freshman cadet at Norwich University. When I first heard about TM, I was skeptical about it because I had never heard anything about this type of stuff before. But I figured, why not try it, because it can't hurt. And my father, who suffers from PTSD himself, so I went about it, and I got the email, and I said I would do it. I was a rook, and I found TM quite rewarding because I found myself able to outperform the other recruits. Along with this, I found it easier to take orders under stressful situations and become more in tune to what was being said rather than getting flustered because I was getting yelled at by more than one person. In high-stress situations, I was able to stay calm, cool, and collective. TM has helped me with my study habits because I've been able to focus better for longer periods of time. My main reason for doing TM was my father. He's a retired Marine for 21 years and was deployed to Iraq twice. When he came home, he was a different person and eventually started to seek help. As I do TM, I think about all of the benefits that it can give wounded warriors as himself because they are able to relax and get rid of the everyday stressors and become at peace with what has occurred with their life. As for sports and football, I have noticed playing quarterback has become much more easier because in the pocket, I feel more relaxed and it's easier to read defenses. I feel like this gives me an edge on the field against the other athletes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Gerard, and I'm a junior at Norwich University. I participated in the meditation study, first as a member of the men's lacrosse team, and then as a freshman squad leader. I initially started practicing TM to help enhance my athletic ability, but soon found it enhancing my leadership in a military setting also. I mostly found the effects of meditation bettering my focus and efficiency. In the spring of 2011, I started meditating along with a handful of teammates from the men's lacrosse team. Personally, I saw an improvement in focus and had a clearer mind even in the middle of drills when I was winded. The awareness that I developed was great. I knew what to do and say on and off the field. The team saw the effects of meditation, I believe, and had the best season in a decade. When I took the job as a squad leader for freshmen, I wasn't sure what to expect with this study. Being as it was a volunteer study, I assumed we would have a group of freshmen who weren't as resilient as they could be. I believe that was an accurate assumption, but an amazing thing happened. These scared, stressed freshmen became rapidly resilient. Personally, as a leader in front of them, I found myself making the right decisions and finding the right words to say, even when I was under stress. I believe that the awareness I gained through meditation was fantastic and contributed greatly to my athletic and leadership success. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Lieber. I'm a junior in the Corps of Cadets and am going to commission to the United States Navy next year following my graduation. This year in the Corps, I was the platoon sergeant for the TM platoon, which is essentially the drill sergeant. They would be the focus of the study. So what President Schneider was saying about them being the recruits, I was their drill sergeant. And my job was to effectively develop them as cadets and train them as future leaders in the United States military and society. I started meditating just a few days before the Rooks arrived, and I quickly began to notice the effects of meditating. Rook Week is a week of controlled chaos for the Rooks and a week of trying to control chaos for the cadre. During this week, cadre staffs, typically composed of a drill sergeant or a platoon sergeant and 3 staff sergeants, will typically work in shifts, allowing each member to be appropriately rested at all times and allowing the overall staff to work effectively. But during this week, we didn't work in shifts. When we would drop the Rooks off at their scheduled station, we would go back to one of our rooms and then meditate. And then all 4 of us would be back there to get at the Rooks, which allowed us to train them more effectively. Throughout the year, we found that our Rooks were having a much less difficult time learning the information being taught to them compared to that which we had seen in the other platoons. We were able to teach a lesson, and the Rooks were able to immediately apply that knowledge to their daily lives as well as their jobs and their duties as Rooks in the Corps of Cadets. They became much more diligent workers in terms of not only their work in the Corps, but also their academics, resulting in outstanding grade point averages platoon-wide, including the cadre staff. There's no doubt in my mind that Transcendental Meditation makes a difference and has made a difference in my life more incredible than I had initially expected. With a larger workload than the average college student and the everyday stressors of college life, I was better able to cope with the stress and manage my work, allowing me to have an outstanding semester. Having seen my own results, I plan on taking TM with me after college in all my future actions and endeavors. Thank you.
The mother in me wants to say you guys are adorable. But I just want to say you're incredible. Those are, but I think you're adorable too. In recognition of not just less stressed leadership, but great leadership, obviously, with these young men, at Norwich University, we're about to present President Schneider with the Resilient Warrior Award for 2012 from the David Lynch Foundation. To do that, I want you to help me welcome back Jerry Yellen and allow me to introduce Ed Schloman, who along with Jerry is the co-chair of Operation Warrior Wellness. Ed is a retired Chief Master Sergeant from the New York Air National Guard and a Vietnam Marine, a disabled veteran serving from 1960 to 1966. He is currently president of Fidelis Services Group, a certified service-disabled veteran-owned business. Some of his military decorations include the Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Force Commendation and Achievement Medals, Vietnam Special Medal, Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, and the New York State Military Commendation Medal. Bring your medals and come on up, guys.
Thank you, Candy. Stand at attention, you're with a captain. He's talking to a sergeant major. I don't think it works. I think we see a future general or an admiral in the audience. With the world economy in dire straits and so much of the political world in upheaval, educators have never faced more changes or challenges in creating a new generation of leaders. To truly lead in the educational arena of the 21st century necessitates much more than developing a curriculum for the students. It requires highly effective use of resources and mental, emotional clarity. As a result, visionary leaders in education are required to learn how to be more resilient, to teach their students to be more resilient. But when your students are in a military university, and the odds that some of them one day will face even true dire straits such as combat, that resilient leader needs to be very, very special. Resilience is often described as a personal quality that predisposes individuals to bounce back in the face of loss or stress. Resilient leaders, however, do more than bounce back. They bounce forward. Bouncing forward to arm your students with a tool that shall prepare them to overcome anxiety, depression, drug dependence, maintain balance within the family, and overcome the possibility of PTSD is what President Schneider has accomplished. He has given his students a powerful tool, which we call Transcendental Meditation, TM. TM is becoming part of the curriculum at this prestigious Norwich University. You have seen and heard from his students how deeply this meditation has transformed their lives, how deeply they respect the gift President Schneider has given them. He is a true educator, he is a true leader, and he's a true resilient warrior. So it is with deep respect and honor that the David Lynch Foundation bestows this Operation Warrior Wellness Resilient Warrior Award for the year 2012 to a great American, a great warrior, a great friend, to President Schneider.
You guys are awesome. It's good to be with you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. You want to get it? Okay.
Thank you.
I'm accepting this on behalf of all of Norwich. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
When that car bomb went off, I remember everything was in slow motion.
It's so horrible, these explosions and killing and seeing his friends right in front of you, your good friends.
That was the hardest for me, listening to everybody screaming. I didn't know how to deal with that, and it just, something stayed in me, or I should say, something went away.
Oh, when he come back. That's the part that sometimes I don't like to talk because it's so painful. He was out of his mind for the effects of the war.
I just gravitated towards alcohol. I bought whiskey, I bought Jack Daniels, because as soon as I had a couple swigs, I was like, all right, well, that takes care of that. And so every time afterwards, when it would creep up, when you go drink.
He had many car accidents because he was drinking. He said, I don't care, Mom, I don't care. If I die tomorrow and I crash a car. So I was afraid many times he will kill himself. Many. That one day when I come from work, or when I go downstairs, when I wake up in the morning, he will be dead. I lived like that for so many years. When he found the TM, he changed his way of thinking.
I experienced this relief from the constant anxiety attack my life had become. TM, it's all in the individual. It comes back to the core of who you are as a person and what you're made of, and you have to give yourself a chance to try to make yourself better.
He's thinking about the future, thinking about respecting more than anything, respecting himself, loving himself. He is happy. It's beautiful. It's incredible. That is the boy that I raised. TM saved his life.
I think in the services they call that collateral damage, the moms and the dads and the wives and the kids that go through PTS along with those who are actually suffering from it, which is why we have our next guest. Dr. Serena Grosswald is a George Washington University-trained cognitive learning specialist and research investigator at the National Institutes of Health-funded Center for Natural Medicine and Prevention. She is co-authoring a series of trials studying the effects of the Transcendental Meditation technique on PTS and resilience among military personnel and veterans. Dr. Grosswald.
Thank you. Well, resilience is a term that has become prominent in our vocabulary in the last few years, primarily because of the focus on trying to build a strong military force that can withstand the challenges of deployment and combat, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Everyone is familiar now with the numbers of troops that have been affected by post-traumatic stress. We needn't remind you of the level of extent of that problem. But you've just heard one parent's story. I think that those numbers of those who are struggling with post-traumatic stress or the effects of being deployed or combat, we can multiply that probably by a factor of 2, maybe 3 or more. Because as Candy mentioned, for everyone that participates in the service, there's a mother, a father, a husband, a wife, a son, or a daughter, all of whom are affected by the long absences of their service person as they're away, and then trying to cope with the changed person when they return, who's not the same as the one that left. TM provides a technique for helping these families cope and a way for dealing with the stress of having someone return different from when they left. I want to just read you a quote from one soldier's wife and her experience. Since learning TM, I've been feeling so wonderful doing my TM twice daily. The biggest improvement is the lack of anxiety I now have in my life. I went through so much stress and anguish trying to help Luke dealing with his PTSD and how it affected my girls. I was a mess. I didn't know how to help myself or how to let the worries go. TM has been amazing. It is life-changing. And she mentioned her girls, her children. We have a whole generation that are being affected by having a parent gone, potentially not returning, or returning as someone different than who they left. These children often suffer silently. They don't know how to express their stress, often not even aware of the fact that they're under such huge stress and the way that it affects them. I'll tell you the story of one retired special ops, who was suffering from PTSD. And after he learned TM, he realized the extent to which it was affecting his family. He learned afterwards that his daughter had been sleeping on the couch out in the living room the entire time that he was deployed. She was maintaining her own vigilance while he was in Iraq. This has a significant effect on these children. And research has shown that early exposure to chronic stress results in greater psychological disorders later in life. Problems like ADHD, behavior problems, severe anxiety, depression, substance abuse. TM for the families provides a tool for them to buffer the consequences of having a family member away and experiencing what that family member is experiencing. And there's another group, some who are probably in this audience as well, who also suffer the effects of PTSD in a different way. And those are the healthcare providers. Providing service and healthcare to the large numbers of people that they see every day, hearing their stories every day, has a significant effect on them. And research has shown that the stress of the care provider affects the patient outcomes. We also have been providing TM to several of the social workers in different areas. Here's a story of one of those social workers. Before starting TM, I'd been increasingly frustrated, anxious, and overwhelmed at work. The littlest thing would set me off into some kind of tirade. Then the tears would come. Then I'd pull myself together again and start back at trying to unbury myself from my mound of ever-increasing severity and intensity of the workload. I've never felt like this before with this job. I've been here since we first stood up in September 2007. Since I started TM, I no longer have the tirades or crying outbursts. I don't dread seeing certain patients anymore. I've been sleeping very well in a deep sleep, waking up to do my meditation, then feeling lighter for most of the day. My perspective on things is changing. My kids have commented on the change, and they love it. Resilience is the ability to respond to a stressful situation without being overwhelmed by it and being able to quickly return to a state of calm. It's not only our service members who need that, but it's also their families and their caregivers. You've heard the science and how and why the Transcendental Meditation technique works and the research that supports it. Now we've had some glimpse into what it really means to an individual and to a family, and how TM can change lives. Thank you.
Our last speaker before the break is Colonel Brian Rees. He is a graduate of the U.S. Army War College. He has over 35 years of commissioned service. He is a veteran of 4 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He received his MD and his Master of Public Health from Tulane University. He is a board-certified family physician. His latest article on the application of TM and other modalities to promote soldier resilience was just published in the November issue of Military Medicine. Dr. Rees.
Thank you. Candy, if I may. You're part of my Sunday mornings also. You and Fareed, your colleague. Yeah. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. There are advantages and disadvantages to being last. I get to hear what everybody else has to say. And now I know clearly that all of my prepared remarks are redundant. So thank you very much. So instead, I'll just tell a story or two and then get off the stage. So this is a semi-war story. I know there are some real warriors in this audience, and I'm a medical puke, so I'm not going to tread too strongly on that ground. But this was in Abu Ghraib in 2006. There's a slice of a combat support hospital inside the prison, which is inside the city of Abu Ghraib. And so we had a bunch of 10th Mountain and a bunch of Marines that were staged with us, and then they'd go out and patrol the area, which was in 2006, before the surge, before the Sunni awakening, so it was a hostile environment. So we'd take care of the detainees, but we'd also take care of the mess that would come from contacts outside the walls, which were just a couple hundred meters away. So this one evening, I'm walking around the hospital, and there's a gaggle of nurses with this toddler, which you wouldn't see every day. It's a beautiful little girl, probably about 18 months old, with these huge long eyelashes and giant eyes. So I said, where did she come from? She said, well, her family's all messed up in the emergency room. So I would go down to the emergency room, which was where I would work intermittently. And sure enough, what had happened, I'm standing next to this Marine who's probably 19 years old or so, and he had been manning a checkpoint a couple hundred meters outside the gate, and a vehicle had run their checkpoint. This minivan comes. So 20 minutes ago, this Marine is at the checkpoint, probably bored to tears because there's nothing going on for hours, and then a vehicle approaches, ignores all the signs, doesn't slow down, and at 150 meters, he fires warning shots. 75 meters or 100 meters or so, you fire into the engine block, and then if that doesn't stop him, you light up the vehicle. So he figures, this is a vehicle full of insurgents with a vehicle-borne IED that's going to come and blow up him and his buddies. So he lights them up, and then he and his buddies go to the vehicle, and what do they find but this family? A couple of guys, women, and children all shot to hell. So I'm standing next to him, and I make some innocuous comment about, what a mess or what a shame or something like that. And he says, yes, sir, sucks to be a bad driver in Iraq. And I could just see that numbing starting, and I don't know how long he'd been there, but if it hadn't already started, there it was. He was distancing himself. And what else he had gone through, who knows. So, what happens then? Does he get a month off in Kuwait to go swimming or something like that? No. From there, he and his buddies, they go right back out and do it again. And then a few days later, I'd see him or some other guys in his unit, and they'd be there because one of their guys has gotten shot, because we're, again, right in Abu Ghraib, and there were some very accurate snipers right there in town, and every week, couple of times a week, they'd kill one of our Marines. So we kept having these memorial services. So there would be that, and then they would get wounded, and they would bring in their own wounded. So it kept going on and on. And I remember thinking, this is some tough duty these guys got, because it was stressing me, and I was meditating at that time, and I was meditating regularly, and I thought, how can they go out and do this day in and day out without having this tool? Because it fit right into my routine. When you deploy and you go into theater, you want to optimize. It's like being an athlete. You got to be mentally sharp. You got to be physically up to speed. So, and that there's going to be some chaos in your schedule. So, you try to create a schedule. You create a battle rhythm, which includes exercise and good food, and you're trying to stay fit. And for me, an integral part of that was twice a day, every day, more, religiously. It's not a religion, but with regularity, like brushing my teeth, I would make sure I would never miss a meditation, because that was my chance to bleed off the stress and kind of to reset whatever tread had come off the tire. Can put some back on, and then you carry on and just go day by day until you get out of there. And I thought it would be very difficult to be particularly a young combat arms guy. We saw those MRI, the functional MRI with the little, the functional black holes in the frontal cortex. Day in and day out, having your buddies get shot, day in and day out, shooting and killing and wounding the bad guys, and then every so often shooting and killing and wounding the non-combatants, the civilians on the battlefield, that can create those functional holes. Your amygdala gets revved up, and just all the time you're in that mode of fight or flight and stress. And it's not surprising that soldiers and Marines and so forth who are subjected to that find themselves performing the kinds of behaviors that get people in trouble. There's this expression, the strategic corporal, in this age of CNN and the news cycle, and cell phones everywhere where people take movies of themselves doing really stupid things. And if you got a functional hole in your frontal cortex, you may well do a stupid thing and then augment it by taking pictures of it. And that, it doesn't excuse what happened, but it doesn't in any case, it doesn't help our effort to accomplish the mission to have these sorts of dysfunctional things going on. So I think TM is helpful in just a wide variety of areas, but particularly in terms of promoting resilience so that soldiers and service personnel in the theater can have the best edge that they can to perform and not get worn down and beat up and not be a mess when they come back. And then also, as has been mentioned, its utility in treating established post-traumatic stress. I think that's of great value also. I think it's underutilized. I'm scheduled to go back again in September, and I think I'm very comfortable with that. I think I've got this ace up my sleeve. I've got this tool that I can employ. I'm going to be doing every day, twice a day, and I think that everybody who is going to deploy, and especially those who are going to be doing jobs that are a lot more difficult than an old senior colonel, they need this tool, and it is underutilized, and we should utilize it more. Thank you.
So I'll share a secret with you. We're in segment 17, and my instructions here are Candy summarizes and closes before breakout sessions. So I don't think you actually need me to summarize. I will tell you one thing that Bobby and others at the David Lynch Foundation won't say. So let me just quickly say, if you would like to help Operation Warrior Wellness to get this technique to as many soon-to-be warriors, current warriors, past warriors as possible, those who want it, please see them because they will tell you a way to help financially. But I think the way I would summarize this up is, now you know, so pass it on. Thank you all for your attention.
Segment 18. I want to thank some people very much. And first, I'd like to thank Candy Crowley, who is, with scientific objectivity, I think I can say, the smartest and best journalist and commentator on television today. I'm a big, big fan. I'd like to thank Deputy Secretary Gould. I'd like to thank President Schneider and his incredible team and cadets for coming all the way from Vermont today. I'd like to thank our wonderfully distinguished veterans for their service and for their presence here with us today, our research scientists, medical researchers, brain scientists, everybody for their wonderful presentations. Everybody in this room really is a person of authority, a person with a circle of influence, and really I invite your help in helping us bring this program, which also, I think, with scientific objectivity, I can say, based on the research, has the greatest promise of any approach, in addition to all the tools we currently have, but a powerful new approach to augment and increase the success of all the current efforts to bring this program to all of our troops in training, veterans, and their families and loved ones who have to cope with the enormous challenges due to their service of our country. I'm going to invite our Sergeant-at-Arms, Executive Director Bobby Roth, to give us our marching orders now. But for myself, I also thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
An extraordinary afternoon, and thank you really again, Candy, for coming. Really great, and everyone else. I have a few announcements. You all have received this card in your packet. And it's an opportunity for you to fill out, and if you want more information about the Operation Warrior Wellness programs, as well as if you're interested in learning more about Transcendental Meditation itself. If you don't have a pen, there are pens outside, and there are some glass bowls that you can drop this in, so if you'd like to complete that. I also want to acknowledge there are many people, but if the others from Norwich could please stand up who've come with the team. If you could stand up. It's an amazing, amazing, yeah. You also have received a listing of some of the programs and research, some of the partnerships and research projects that Operation Warrior Wellness are collaborating with. And finally, I think it's very important to acknowledge one individual here, young may he be, who has done a phenomenal job to organize this. Please acknowledge Austin Iyer. We are here because of his work. Also, Dave Zobek. Dave, would you please stand up? Dave is the one who's been teaching the program at Norwich, along with Peter Travalis, wherever he might be, and others. Peter's back there. And finally, there's one woman who we would have liked to have spoken, but it was late, and Mark, don't laughing. And that's Nisha Money, Dr. Nisha Money. Could you please stand up, Nisha? Are you here? Yes, she's a retired Air Force surgeon, and she's working as the Director of Global Health and Integrative Medicine at the Global Healing Initiatives Institute. We are now done. We're going to break for a few minutes. For those of you who would like to remain for the breakout sessions, come back in 5 minutes. I think there's some refreshments. And we are going to have an opportunity to answer questions of yours, more about what exactly Transcendental Meditation is, how it works, how it differs from other forms of meditation, how the program is implemented into organizations or used on the military college for about 45 minutes. But I just want to thank everyone again. This has been absolutely wonderful and very inspiring afternoon. Thank you for coming.
Warriors and veterans on and off the battlefield. Today we know that many veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress. We know their symptoms and their pain are real. We also know that there are proven treatments that can provide hope, relief, and healing. And we are also humbled by what we don't know about how to prevent and treat PTSD. But as evidenced by your attendance here today and by the work that you're doing, you're bringing awareness to the problem and new approaches to deal with it. Now at VA, we're also working to raise awareness about post-traumatic stress disorder. We're providing world-class mental health treatment, and we're seeking out new and better ways to prevent and treat PTSD. The scale of our effort is substantial. 20,500 mental health providers, treating at least 1.3 million veterans with specialty care in mental health at a cost of about $5.9 billion annually. VA uses state-of-the-art clinical practice guidelines for PTSD care. They were developed collaboratively with the Department of Defense. We employ an integrated mental health strategy that includes help for families and helps provide continuity of care for service members who are transitioning into veteran status. We screen 100% of the service members and encourage treatment through our Make the Connection campaign that helps veterans of all eras learn more about how other veterans have benefited from treatment and care, and of course to seek that for themselves. And we also cooperate with a wide range of nonprofit organizations, 501c3s, whose dedicated volunteers provide additional options and complementary services. It's really a team effort. But all of you know that we are also overcoming a terrific headwind. First is our own culture. I'm okay. I can handle this. Incentives in the work environment that basically is meditation. One recently published VA-supported clinical trial on mantra meditation showed that it was helpful in reducing PTSD symptoms such as hyperarousal compared to a control group. Our meditation field projects have been well received by our veterans, and this is critical. We have to recruit people on a voluntary basis to participate, and we expect to recruit even more in the coming months. We've also begun work collaboratively with the National Institute of Health and the DoD on future research opportunities in this area. With your help, the help of the folks, people in this room, we are understanding the effectiveness of meditation and PTSD in new ways, and we're hoping to join a range of potential therapeutic approaches to treat PTSD at the VA. What we once imagined as a new care paradigm may find its proven and rightful place in practical applications to the benefit of our veterans, adding to the tools we have to provide even better care that is safe, effective, and evidence-based. The point here is that these techniques are additive to the set of treatments that we have for our veterans today. VA continues to encourage our researchers to explore new areas of treatment for PTSD, including meditation, and we intend to make available additional research and development funding in the future to make this possible. Thanks for your invitation today to bring attention to the potential that meditation has on PTSD and to highlight VA's commitment to expanding our understanding of how to prevent and relieve PTSD with evidence-based studies. Today's summit, this summit, will shed more light on studies that have been performed, areas of promise, and opportunities for future study. Congratulations to the David Lynch Foundation and for all you are doing to address the mental health needs of our veterans. Thank you.
It's just exciting to me to have someone with the Secretary's staff, importantly to this, a Navy veteran. He served aboard the guided missile destroyer Richard E. Byrd as a naval intelligence reservist. Captain Gould was recalled to active duty for Operation Noble Eagle and Enduring Freedom. He is co-author of a book, The People Factor, Strengthening America by Investing in the Public Service. Ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Secretary of the VA, W. Scott Gould.
Boy, I don't know how many folks here have tuned in on Sunday mornings to that voice. It's nice to actually meet you, Candy. And that's a great program. Thank you all for inviting me to your National Summit on Resilience, the Brain, and Meditation. I'm pleased to be here with several colleagues, Dr. Raul Perehense, Ms. Jan Kemp, Dr. Alex Amaya, and Dr. Sonia Batten. Thank you for all the work that you do at the VA. This summit is particularly timely. Alternative forms of medicine for patients with post-traumatic stress are gaining acceptance, they're increasing in popularity, they're augmenting our current healthcare solutions. It wasn't long ago, in the lifetimes of many of us in this room, when combat or other trauma-related stresses defied diagnosis, much less proper and timely treatment. Pablum advice like, shake it off, you'll be fine, only tended to trivialize the deeply rooted pain that stigmatized and ate away at the lives of too many veterans. We may never know the number of soldiers and veterans stricken by stress that the system failed to recognize or acknowledge. After more than a decade of war, there's a renewed and growing awareness that the consequence of combat, the urgent need we have to attend to the invisible wounds of war, and our obligation to care for those whom we have sent as a country into harm's way. I think it's fair to say that we're adopting a more informed vision of the many mental stressors that affect our war. Say, if I admit I need help, maybe I'm going to jeopardize that next promotion or call into question my security clearance. As families, we shield people from the recognition that they need help. He's okay. They'll get over it. Don't pay any attention to that behavior. And finally, and most profoundly, our own inability to admit when we need help and take the difficult step of reaching out for it. But the fact remains that even when we do get people into treatment, not everyone responds to treatments currently offering the most likelihood of benefit. And so we have to learn to recognize, relieve, and cure PTSD to veterans' patients in new ways. To this end, VA has called on a proud tradition of mental health research and development that has produced effective treatments for PTSD, such as cognitive processing and prolonged exposure therapy, as well as leading-edge clinical care that has been extended to include many alternative and complementary medicine treatments, including meditation. Last year, VA completed 2 evidence reviews that screened 1,776 articles and selected 7 randomized clinical trials for review. The conclusion was that current evidence on meditation and PTSD needs enhancement. We know that meditation has been used in treatment of PTSD, and we're anxious to identify its benefits and to determine if there are any potential risks for veterans in its use and under this condition. To develop our understanding of the effectiveness of meditation, we group meditation into roughly 3 buckets: transcendental meditation, mantric repetition, and mindfulness. And we resolved to fund studies in each of those areas. As a result, VA has supported 3 clinical trials and 9 evaluation projects to study the effectiveness on meditation on PTSD. These projects have begun, and we're looking forward to the results across all 3 types of.
Hi. My name is Candy Crowley. Welcome to the National Summit on Resilience, the Brain, and Meditation. As your invitation noted, today we want to look at the research and the applications of TM to promote resilience, help overcome post-traumatic stress disorder, and other stresses among veterans, active duty personnel, cadets, and their families. The need to help form a generation of resilient warriors is pretty clear. We're talking about warriors equipped not just with the tools of combat, but with the tools to adapt to the mental and emotional stresses of today's military life. Like you, I'm reminded way too often in the news business of the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, among our veterans, the suicides, the attempted suicides, and the toll it takes on loved ones and caregivers. I am so pleased to be at this forum where we have a stellar cast of military leaders and medical researchers, really of the highest caliber, who are here despite some really crazy busy schedules to explore the practical, effective solutions to help overcome PTSD and the related stresses. I learned TM several years ago. It's helped me manage the stress in my life, which is minuscule compared to what the military personnel face every day. But I'm still aware of this compelling research on TM and PTSD. I've heard amazing stories of the transformation among meditating vets. And I know the nonprofit organization that's hosting this event, the David Lynch Foundation, and its division operation, Warrior Wellness. They are all great. Like you, I always want to know more. I want to see where the research has gone and what the smart folks are learning. So I want to begin with our first speaker, W. Scott Gould. He is the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA. Prior to that, he held top executive positions at IBM Global Business Services, the O'Gara Company, an investment services firm, and Evolve, which is the tech services company. He is, I think more